Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're focusing on a partnership that's becoming really vital in geopolitics, the relationship between India and Africa. It's evolving, growing.
Absolutely. We're looking at some pretty big numbers already. Trade is around, what, $100 billion a year?
Yeah, and aiming for $200 billion by 2030, which is, ambitious. Plus, there's about $80 billion in cumulative investment and lots of development cooperation, too.
Right. And for our discussion today, we're mainly drawing from an article that really lays out the history, the significance, the challenges, and the potential future here.
So our mission really is to pull out the key insights into this connection. This is super relevant for you if you're following India's global footprint, maybe preparing for UPSC exams, or just keen on general knowledge and international affairs. Okay, let's unpack this. Maybe we should start with how this whole relationship has actually developed over time. It's not exactly new, is it?
Oh, not at all. The historical roots run deep. You've got ancient trade links across the Indian Ocean. Think spices, textiles, precious stones, that sort of thing.
And the Indian diaspora presence. That must have played a role, too.
A huge role. You see large, influential communities in places like Kenya, South Africa, Mauritius. They've built cultural and economic bridges over generations.
And then there's the shared colonial past, right?
Yeah.
The British Empire connection. That must have created a certain bond.
Definitely. It forged a shared experience. Think about Gandhi's time in South Africa. His influence later on figures like Mandela and the anti-apartheid struggle. That's a powerful link.
So after independence, say 1947 through to 1990, what did that look like?
Well, post-independence India was a very strong supporter of African liberation movements, vocal opposition to apartheid, especially at the UN.
And they were both key players in the non-aligned movement, weren't they?
Exactly. Founding members, advocating for sovereignty, independent development paths, trying to stay out of the Cold War tug of war. It was very much about shared political ideals then.
Was it just diplomatic support or more practical stuff, too?
Oh, practical too. India started the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, ITEC. That provided technical help, scholarships for African students. You also saw the beginnings of concessional lines of credit, loans on easier terms for development projects.
Okay, so fast forward to the post-Cold War era, into the 90s and 2000s. Did the focus shift?
Yeah, it had definitely shifted. Less about just ideological solidarity, more towards pragmatic engagement.
Yeah.
Mutual economic interests, development needs started coming to the forefront.
More focus on economics and development projects.
Precisely. Development cooperation really ramped up, especially those concessional lines of credit for infrastructure. That became a major tool.
And wasn't there that big tech initiative, the Pan-African E-Network?
Yes. What's fascinating here is that project. It was President Kalam's vision, really ahead of its time, using satellite tech, fiber optics for telemedicine, teleeducation across many African countries.
Connecting the continent digitally, that's quite something.
It really was. Showed a commitment to leveraging India's tech strengths for Africa's development.
So bringing us closer to today, say from 2008 onwards, things seem to have become more structured.
That's a good way to put it. The launch of the India-Africa Forum Summit, the IAFS, in 2008 was key. It institutionalized the dialogue at the highest level.
So regular meetings, a proper framework.
Exactly. It brought in the partnership trade, security, development, all brought under this umbrella. More comprehensive engagement.
And beyond the summits, we're seeing more happening on the ground, like security cooperation.
Definitely. Increased collaboration on peacekeeping, counterterrorism is noticeable. And capacity building is still huge. Thousands trained through ITEC.
And wasn't there that big push for the African Union in the G20?
Absolutely. India played a crucial role advocating for the AU's permanent G20 membership during its presidency in 2023. That was a major diplomatic signal of India's commitment to amplifying Africa's global voice.
Okay, so that's a clear evolution. Now let's pivot. For those of you perhaps studying for UPSC or similar exams, understanding why Africa is strategically important for India now is critical. Let's dig into that significance.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Africa's importance for India is multi-layered. First, strategically, especially maritime security. Think about the Indian Ocean.
Vital sea lanes, trade routes.
Exactly. Africa's coastline is huge. Securing those routes, projecting naval influence, it's vital for India. You hear about the necklace of diamonds strategy.
Which is about building strategic partnerships and presence points.
Precisely. It's about ensuring maritime security. And we've seen concrete steps.
Like the base in Mauritius.
Yes, establishing India's first overseas naval base there in 2024, that's significant. Plus, deploying defense attaches in African countries, hosting the India-Africa Army Chiefs Conclave in 2023. It all points to deeper military and security ties for regional stability.
Okay, security is one angle. What about the economic side? That seems huge.
Oh, absolutely indispensable. Africa has vast natural resources India needs, plus rapidly growing markets for Indian goods and services. And it's a two-way street, fueling growth on both sides.
And the numbers back that up.
They do. Bilateral trade hitting over, USD 83 billion in 2023-24. That's a big jump, like 21% since 2011-12. And Indian investment is around USD 75 billion, potentially doubling by 2030. It shows real economic interdependence.
It's not just general trade, though, right? Specific resources are key.
You're right. Critical minerals especially. Africa is dominant in things like cobalt, manganese, copper essential for clean energy tech, advanced manufacturing, stuff India really needs.
Cobalt from the DRC, for instance.
Exactly. The DRC controls something like 70% of mined cobalt. And then there's energy, oil, and gas from Nigeria, Angola, others. Increasingly important for India's energy security, especially with global markets being so volatile.
Beyond resources and markets, India's role as a development partner seems quite distinctive.
It is. It's not just about traditional aid. Those lines of credit over USD 12 billion across 206 projects in 43 countries, that's significant investment in infrastructure and capacity.
And the focus on skills and education, like the IIT campus.
Right, the IIT Madras campus in Zanzibar, plus iTech training, vocational programs. These align directly with the African Union's own goals, like Agenda 2063. It's about long-term human capital development.
And does this development partnership give India diplomatic weight?
Absolutely. That push for the AU's G20 seat is a prime example. It boosts India's standing as a champion for the global south. You also see joint initiatives at the WTO, like on IP waivers for COVID vaccines or on agriculture rules. It shows shared perspectives on global governance.
Okay, one last area, technology. Seems like a lot of potential there.
Huge potential. What's fascinating here is Africa's digital transformation journey. It's happening fast. Indian IT firms, startups, they see massive opportunities, smart cities, fintech, building digital infrastructure.
Partnering with governments and local businesses.
Yes, and then there's collaboration on things like renewable energy. Under the International Solar Alliance, India has committed, I think, USD 2 billion for solar projects in Africa. That hits energy security and climate goals for both.
So it sounds like a really positive, growing relationship. But the article we looked at also pointed out some serious challenges, right? Things holding back even better cooperation. Understanding these is key, especially for, a balanced UPSC answer.
Definitely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, despite all the positives, there are real hurdles. One thing mentioned is a kind of strategic inertia, maybe gaps in consistent high-level engagement.
Like that 9-year gap between the big India-Africa summits.
Exactly. A 9-year gap since the last IAFS. That sends a signal, intentional or not. It raises questions about sustained political focus at the very top.
Especially when you see how active other players are. China, the US, EU, Russia. They seem to have very regular Africa summits.
Precisely. Their frequent, high-profile engagement keeps them visible, sets agendas. India's less frequent summits might make it seem, less committed compared to the competition. It could affect influence.
Then there's the security situation in parts of Africa.
Right.
That must be a challenge.
A major one. You've seen a worrying number of coups recently, ongoing conflicts in several regions. That instability makes investment risky, complicates security cooperation efforts.
And issues like weak governance or rising radicalization.
They add another layer of complexity, makes it harder for India or any partner to effectively engage on things like peacekeeping or counterterrorism support.
What about fundamental economic issues? Infrastructure seems to be a recurring theme.
It's a critical bottleneck. Africa's transport and logistics infrastructure is often fragmented, sometimes a legacy of colonial times where routes led out not across the continent.
Which makes trade within Africa and with India harder and more expensive.
Exactly. Higher cost, difficulties building regional supply chains, limited market access for Indian firms trying to operate there. It holds back those ambitious trade goals.
And many African nations are facing serious financial pressures too. Debt is a big one.
Huge. The debt crisis in sub-Saharan Africa is severe. Debt-to-GDP ratios have doubled in many places over the last decade. It points to bigger systemic issues in global finance, too.
So India's lines of credit, while helpful, might not be enough to tackle those deeper structural problems.
They're valuable, but, probably not sufficient on their own. It limits the capacity of African countries to fund big projects or partnerships.
And Africa is increasingly a stage for global competition, right? Lots of powers vying for influence.
Very much so. It's an intensifying geopolitical contest. You have China's massive Belt and Road Initiative, huge financial clout. Western powers have their long-standing aid and security ties.
And where does that leave India?
Well, India's approach is often seen as more cautious, its economic footprint smaller compared to China's. There's a risk of being marginalized if it doesn't step up its game strategically and economically.
Lastly, the article mentioned health infrastructure challenges.
Yes. Healthcare systems in many parts of Africa are under-resourced. There's limited local capacity to manufacture medicines or vaccines. Regulatory systems can be fragmented.
So even if India wants to help, say, with vaccine production, it's complex to scale up locally.
Exactly. Distributing affordable medicines, setting up local manufacturing, faces real logistical and policy hurdles on the ground.
Okay, so quite a few challenges. Given all that, what can India realistically do to strengthen these ties, to make the partnership more effective?
This raises an important question, definitely. One suggestion is to institutionalize a more robust, regular dialogue, maybe an annual India-Africa Strategic Partnership Forum.
Bringing together not just governments, but businesses, academics, civil society.
Precisely, a multi-stakeholder approach. It would allow for continuous engagement, quicker responses, joint agenda setting, keep the momentum going between the big summits.
What about playing to India's strengths, like technology?
Here's where it gets really interesting. India should absolutely lead on technology transfer and innovation-driven capacity building. Think sectoral innovation hubs in Africa, agri-tech, renewables, digital governance, health.
And build on things like the IIT Madras campus in Zanzibar.
Yes, scale up that model. Create more joint R&D centers. Really foster that tech ecosystem connection.
Infrastructure is that big bottleneck we talked about.
Yeah.
How can India help there more effectively?
Maybe championing integrated projects using public-private partnerships, PPP models, co-financing regional transport corridors, energy grids, digital networks, things that connect regions.
Adapting successful Indian models, perhaps.
Potentially. Learnings from projects like the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor might be adaptable, focusing on creating economic corridors.
And tackling the financial constraints, given the debt issues.
Innovating on finance is crucial. Collaborating more closely with the African Development Bank, perhaps, using blended finance, mixing public and private money, exploring diaspora bonds, green bonds.
Ways to mobilize private capital, basically.
Exactly. De-risk investments, support small and medium businesses, expand the financial toolkit beyond just government lines of credit.
Okay. And on the security front, given the instability.
India needs to deepen partnerships, but within African-led frameworks. Support the AU's own security structures. Offer more specialized training, intelligence sharing, cybersecurity cooperation.
Maybe support regional security centers or joint task forces.
Well, could be. Bolster African capabilities to manage their own security challenges, including maritime security in the Indian Ocean region.
What about the people-to-people side? Youth entrepreneurs.
Absolutely critical for the long term. Institutionalize youth empowerment. Expand scholarships. Vocational training massively. Support innovation incubators.
Connecting Indian startups with African entrepreneurs.
Yes, foster those direct links, help build entrepreneurial ecosystems. That harnesses Africa's huge youth population, its demographic dividend.
And climate change, that's a global priority. How does that fit in?
Aligning initiatives with Africa's green transition is key. Co-develop large-scale solar parks India has experience there, like the REWA project. Promote climate-smart agriculture, share water-saving tech, sustainable transport solutions.
So green development partnership.
Exactly. It addresses shared climate challenges and development needs simultaneously.
You mentioned digital earlier. Is there more potential there, like building shared platforms?
Definitely. Think about establishing a Pan-African digital public infrastructure consortium, building on India's experience with India Stack, digital ID, e-governance, payment systems.
Adapting those models for African contexts.
Right. Creating interoperable systems could massively boost financial inclusion, improve governance, empower citizens digitally. It's transformative potential.
And finally, how does India make sure all this cooperation actually delivers results?
Shifting to more outcome-oriented development cooperation. That means robust monitoring and evaluation agreed upon with African partners, using data, focusing on results.
Co-developing the success metrics.
Yes, ensuring local ownership and priorities are central, making sure the assistance leads to measurable progress, and, importantly, leveraging the diaspora more, supporting diaspora-led business incubators, advisory groups. They're a huge asset. What's fascinating here is this potential shift, you see, moving away from a simple donor-recipient model towards something much more like an equal partnership, focused on investment, trade, shared strategic goals.
A real partnership of equals.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a truly strong India-Africa relationship could significantly reshape global dynamics. It would boost the voice of the global South, foster a more multipolar world, and support Africa's own self-directed development path.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you watching global trends. This convergence, India's growth, Africa's potential, it could be a major engine for mutual progress in the 21st century. It really has implications for the whole global order. So the main takeaway for you today is that this India-Africa relationship isn't just growing, it's evolving into a really crucial strategic partnership. It's moving beyond old models of aid towards investment, trade, and tackling shared challenges together.
This raises an important question, though, doesn't it? How effectively can India actually navigate all those challenges we discussed, the competition, the instability, the internal constraints, to realize the full potential of this partnership? That's the key thing to watch.
So what does this all mean for you as you're tracking these major global shifts, whether it's for exams like UPSC or just understanding India's place in the world? This Africa partnership is a really critical piece of that puzzle. If you found this discussion useful, if it helped clarify this important topic, please do give us a like, subscribe for more deep dives, and maybe drop a comment with any further questions you have. Remember, the information we explored today was primarily drawn from an article in the Business Standard. And here's a final thought to leave you with. How might these deepening ties between two enormous dynamic regions, India and Africa, actually reshape the world we live in during this century? What new opportunities and power dynamics might emerge?